So, as of recent, I've been doing horror movie reviews of recent movies that have came out. So today I wanted to do something fun and look back at a lot of horror icons and a couple modern horror icons and rank them against each other in a tier list. Now, obviously the biggest factor of this is going to be my subjective opinion and personal bias, how I felt about them as a kid off first appearance, but other factors we're going to go into this is creature design, how well is the character actually told from a background perspective, like what's the lore on the character, and how good are the movies. But that's going to be a very minor role in this because I do want to eventually make a video actually ranking franchises, but this is specifically ranking the head main protagonist character of the series. And first, before we get started, I want to go through a few notable omissions that won't be on the list simply because I either haven't seen enough of the movies in any recent times, or one of them that I just haven't seen any of and I really need to watch. And that would be Pinhead from Hellraiser, because I just haven't seen those movies in so many years. Hannibal Lecter, because I haven't seen Silence of the Lambs in any recent time, so I didn't feel comfortable enough putting him on there. Creeper from Jeepers Creepers. Honestly, I saw the original Jeepers Creepers, thought it was a good movie. Found out about Victor Salva, couldn't ever see the series the same. Alien and Predator are both on here just because there's so many movies in those franchises that I don't even know how I would necessarily rank Alien and Predator, so I'm just going to leave them off of this. And finally, the tall man from Phantasm will not be appearing on here, simply because I haven't watched any of the Phantasm movies. I know I'm going to get crucified. But before we actually get into the tier list, I want to quickly say if you disagree with anything or agree with anything I say on this, please leave it in the comments. And remember, this is just a fun YouTube video. There's no need to get angry. I know there's a lot of tribalism with horror community fans. So with that being said, let's just get right into it. I thought it was kind of only right to start out with the big three, that being Jason, Michael, and Freddy. And I think my opinion on this may ruffle a couple feathers, but we're going to start with Michael Myers. And I'm going to go ahead and start out by saying I'm putting Michael Myers at A on the tier list. And this tier list is going to range from S being the highest to D being the lowest. I didn't put F because I don't think any of them are truly F. But the reason I'm putting Michael at A and not S is because although I think the design of him, his presence, even his backstory, which is kind of muddy depending on which timeline you're looking at, whether it be the new 2018 version or the original John Carpenter Halloween. But I will say Michael Myers has just got a presence that he's the shadow, you know, he's always lurking. He shows up on Halloween. You know, I love Halloween as a holiday, so those movies, especially the original 1980 one, has a very strong connection with me, and I do remember watching the first three movies as a child especially and absolutely loving them, even loved the anthology. But either way, we're not here to talk about that right now. Michael Myers, I'm putting at A, and the only thing really holding him back from S is just because I just think that Michael Myers could be stronger in some of the movies, the way that he looks. And I think, honestly, there's just characters that I put slightly above him, but he's very on that line of being an S, but I would still put him at A. And now, moving on to Jason Voorhees. Now, the Friday the 13th franchise is a tricky one, and that's why I didn't really want to base it solely off how good the movies are, because there are some very good Friday the 13th movies and there's some very shitty ones. Same thing with Halloween and other franchises we're going to be talking about here. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'm putting Jason Voorhees at B. Now, before you get mad, let's be honest here. Out of the main three and just looking at a lot of horror villains in general, Jason is... He is the B-movie character out of the big three to me, because I do like Jason's character design, especially when he starts getting more tattered, and even some of the crazier designs like with Jason X and the big metallic Jason. I always thought the hockey mask was cool. I own multiple pieces of the Friday the 13th memorabilia. Like, I would still consider myself a fan of the franchise, but just looking at where Jason Voorhees stands pitted against some of these other slasher icons and just horror icons in general, I have to put him at B. And honestly, my reasoning for that is mainly just because his backstory, while I found it slightly compelling, and especially when he first jumped out of the water in that original movie, scared the shit out of me. But I always just was never nearly as scared as a kid of Jason as I was of Michael Myers and another person I'm going to mention here in a minute. So I think it's just honestly my personal bias putting Jason at B, and I think a lot of people would probably agree with that, but a lot of people wouldn't. I think he has a lot of cool kills, but at the same time, he's kind of limited. You know, he's kind of a, for the most part, a slow, brooding slasher villain. And while I appreciate that, I tend to kind of like the more unique characters, and I feel like Jason was almost just a nearly direct ripoff of Michael, obviously expanding a lot later in the series, but I feel like he was started out as just kind of a Michael Myers copy, and even the directors of the original Friday the 13th film have admitted that they drew a lot of inspiration from that movie. So there you go, Jason at B. Freddy Krueger. Now, Freddy Krueger is getting an S, ladies and gentlemen, and the reason I say that is because as a kid, I'd say Freddy is the one that scared me the most. I thought he had the best creature design, with the finger glove being one of the most iconic things ever. And obviously Jason, Michael, and Freddy are all very iconic characters. But for me, Freddy holds that top of the big three icon status because his ability to actually enter dreams is something that scared the hell out of me when I first learned of the concept. And then you even look at his backstory where he was, you know, working with kids and got burned, and depending on what timeline you believe, he was even a child predator, which makes it even more just creepy to me, like the whole concept of Freddy Krueger. And also, like I said, I wasn't gonna include the series bias in here, but if we're being honest, I think Friday the 13th has some of the strongest movies out of any of these franchises, with the first one being a cult classic and the third movie, Dream Warriors, being honestly one of my favorite movies ever. So I'm having to put Freddy up there simply because I love his method of killing, his method of actually getting victims where he needs them to be. It's a very unique character, especially for the time. We hadn't really seen anything like that, like a dream demon. That's terrifying. You know, obviously as an adult, it's like, or just being older, it doesn't scare me as much, or really at all. I don't really get scared from horror movies anymore, other than just psychological thrillers that fuck with your head. Definitely off first impressions alone, Freddy is at an S. And now we're getting to the main man on my shirt right here, Art the Clown, a new slasher icon. And I don't even know if you could call him an icon yet, but I think he's low-key earning his place on that list. And this is probably gonna be the most biased pick out of any of them, but S tier for Art the Clown as well. Honestly, I think one of the like creepiest, most sadistic horror villains we have seen, especially in a long time. Like he is the return to those big three. I feel like Art the Clown is like a spiritual successor to a Freddy Krueger, except he is way more mean-spirited and just more balls to the wall than any horror villain we've really ever seen before. His whole purpose is pain. He enjoys inflicting pain. I feel like he's one of, you know, most characters, they're layered and you kind of feel bad for them almost sometimes. No, Art the Clown is just evil, just pure evil incarnate, but it's almost so comical the way that he laughs while doing these heinous acts. And the fact that he's silent. David Howard Thornton is actually from my city, so that really boosts him up for me. I have a whole collection of Terrifier things like on a shelf in my room, and I don't have that for any other franchise. And I think it's really just the being influenced by Charlie Chaplin and just other silent actors from back in the day. David Howard Thornton delivers Art the Clown in a way that it's just a presence that I don't think anybody else could bring to the character, and I'm so happy that's who they chose to play him, because it's just absolute S tier. I've loved all three of the Terrifier movies. Cannot wait for Terrifier 4 to come out, see what Damien Leone's cooking for this one. So, yeah, man, not much else I can say. Just, I could sit here and glaze Art the Clown all day, but S tier. And now we got Chucky. I'm going to try to get through these a little bit quicker because I've low-key ranted about those guys more because they're just, you know, the ones that are on the top, I feel like, for a lot of people. But here we have Chucky, and I'm putting Chucky at B because although I do like, I've never been an idea of the reanimated doll thing. And now, while I do love Child's Play as a series, I love the comedy in it for the most part. I really just never got into Chucky as much as I did some of the other villains. I think they really kind of made him a little bit too goofy, and like I'm all for goofy horror, as you'll see when I do my my guilty pleasure video on horror franchises. But I just, as far as putting him on, pairing him up against other icons based off look, backstory. I mean, he's got a pretty cool backstory. You know, he's a serial killer that died and got his soul transferred into the body of a doll. But man, I don't know. Like I said, for me, Chucky's just at a B. And now we have Ghostface. Now, Ghostface is getting an A on the tier list. And the reason he is because I was so terrified of Ghostface when I was a child. I remember thinking every time I went near my closet that Ghostface was going to pop out and get me. Didn't help that my cousin always had a Scream mask that he'd wear on Halloween, and ugh. But yeah, and even though the Scream franchises went way downhill, and if we were ranking franchises, this would be a completely different story. But I think Ghostface as a villain is at least A tier for me, because it's also a layered thing where this is a killer, but it's multiple people. You know, Ghostface isn't just one person. The mask design, although very simple, I think is one of the most iconic things to ever come out of horror. I mean, you even got, you know, obviously Scary Movie parodied it, and it still did all these years later. Like, Scream is one of those things that stayed relevant, and Ghostface is the main proponent of that over the years. And I really do like a lot of the kills. Obviously, a lot of them are generic stabbings, but then Ghostface also switches it up a lot and does some things you wouldn't expect. And also the comedical aspect where he's just clumsy as shit, or most of them are. I love that. That's always been I just love Ghostface. I mean, he's not quite an S for me, but putting him at an A, I think is pretty fair. Now we got Pennywise. Now, I'm ranking Pennywise at a B. And the Tim Curry Pennywise and Bill Skarsgård Pennywise are two different characters distinctly. But I would honestly kind of group them together into a B. I'd say the Skarsgård Pennywise definitely edges more towards an A-S tier. Whereas the Bill Curry Pennywise, or Tim Curry, my bad, people. But yeah, the Tim Curry Pennywise always just didn't get me quite as well. It's also way before my time, so by the time I watched it, you know, the new Pennywise was already in production, or the new It. I was never really that scared of the original one. Now, I do think the backstory of Pennywise being an eldritch god and hiding in the sewers, and he's very scary, don't get me wrong, and I think this may have a little bit to do with the fact that I was a lot older when the new It series came out, to where it just doesn't have that same staying power with me that it may for other people. But I think he's got to at least be a B based off character design and backstory alone. I really love the lore of It, other than the fact that they're able to defeat him so easily, especially in the newer series, or the new series of movies. I wasn't a big fan of that, but again, we're not here to rank franchises, so yep, Pennywise at a B. Let's move on. Now we got John Kramer / Saw, or Billy the Puppet, which I really think are kind of interchangeable characters, because it's essentially the same person. Billy the Puppet is just a prop for John Kramer, a physical version of him when he doesn't want to be seen. So honestly, I have to put him at C. Now, that's probably going to piss a lot of people off, and before you get mad in the comments, which valid, but John Kramer, I love the Saw series. I think the movies are great, especially the most recent Saw X was one of my favorite theater experiences. The whole theater was erupting from that shit, because it was just like crazy, even to Saw standards. But I do love the creativeness of his kills. I don't love his motive, though. I honestly think that's what drags him really far down for me on this is because I just never liked Jigsaw's motive. I never liked John Kramer's motive. He's just always seems like a really petty guy, you know what I mean? Billy the Puppet kind of almost brings it up to a B, being how iconic that is. But I just don't think as a horror icon, he's quite as strong as a lot of people who get more screen time as a villain. Now that reveal in the first movie, where you find out he's been the dead body in the room the whole time, that shit was peak cinema, I'm not gonna lie to you. But yeah, honestly, Jigsaw, John Kramer, putting it at C, if we are ranking franchises, it'd probably be a lot higher. And now we have Candyman. And I'm putting Candyman at B simply because I love Tony Todd so much. I mean, I hate being biased because who plays him. Because Candyman as a character is not extremely compelling to me. It was never super scary to me or anything. I don't think his design is all that crazy. Although when he does come around and have all the wasps, bees, whatever flying around him, that shit is definitely scary. And it is definitely scary when he does pop up behind somebody and kill them or something like that. But I think it's just really the way that Tony Todd played the character, the cadence and presence of Candyman that really puts it at a B for me. Because I don't think that alone can bring him up to an A or S, because he doesn't have that same staying power in my brain that some other ones do. But at the same time, have to give Candyman his credit and the team that worked on that movie, because Tony Todd was the perfect actor to play that. R.I.P. B is about as high as I can realistically see putting Candyman. Now we have Jack Torrance from The Shining, which I'm putting at an A. And now the reason I'm putting him at an A is also a lot to do with personal bias. Although there's only really one movie to go off of with him, I absolutely love just the concept of somebody losing their mind and going crazy, and the fact that Jack isn't really your traditional monster. It's not even really a traditional possession thing. It's more of a man that absolutely fucking lost his mind and now he's going on a murder spree. And when he finally loses his mind and goes crazy, that sequence where he's chasing his wife and, you know, the iconic, "Here's Johnny," that, I mean, although it's a little bit, you know, overdone now and it's obviously kind of corny to say now, back then, you know, that actually genuinely got to me because, you know, it kind of makes you think, like, you know, what would happen if my parents went crazy? You know, what would happen if my loved ones went crazy? And, like, it's a concept that I really love, and I think that Jack Torrance delivers it very well. Jack Nicholson, the one that plays him, delivers the performance to an excellent degree. Really not much I can say bad about The Shining. It's one of the most iconic movies for a reason. The cinematography, the music, the acting, it's all very, very excellent. So I'm just having to put Jack Torrance at A because I think he laid the foundation for a lot of movies that came after this, and was genuinely one of the more freaky characters to me as a child, simply because of the way he was displayed as a normal guy that just simply lost his mind. All right, we're down to our final 5 entrants into this little bracket here. We have The Nun. Now, this is going to be our first D tier. And the reason I say that is because The Nun's design isn't that bad. Was low-key kind of freaky in the Conjuring movies, but I'm basing this mainly off of the Nun standalone movie, because that's obviously where she's the focal point, or this demon is the focal point. I honestly couldn't stand that movie. It's one of the most sluggish, boring, just pile of shit movies I've ever seen. And I know there's a couple people that are proponents of this movie and absolutely love it. But man, to me, the Nun as a character is just a very, it's just kind of lazy. Like, I'm not a big fan of it. You know, there's obviously the backstory with the demon and how it ties into the world of The Conjuring, and I'm just not big on it. If you can't tell by hearing me talk about it, I'm honestly not huge on the Conjuring movies, aside from, honestly, the first 2 movies I thought were very solid. And then after that, I think they kind of lost the plot a little bit and took it too far down like an Insidious route. and also just the fact that the same actor plays a dad in Insidious that plays Ed Warren. I never really understood that choice from a studio perspective, but because I mean, there you go. And now we have Annabelle. I wanted to put the two kind of Conjuring juggernauts back to back. Annabelle to me was creepy back in the day for sure. I always kind of thought it was a little stupid. Again, I'm not big on the whole reanimated doll idea. Honestly, I think my favorite version of that was probably Slappy from Goosebumps, which probably just lost all my credibility for everybody in here. But just being honest for real, I'm not a huge fan of that whole concept, so that kind of lowers it for me. On top of the fact that I was always kind of under the impression of like, is Annabelle really a threat? Because with Chucky, it's like, yeah, you could shoot him, but that motherfucker's gonna come back. When it comes to Annabelle, I feel like if they could have destroyed the doll, then it wouldn't have even really been a threat. You know what I mean? Put a couple slugs in that thing and it's probably done for. So I'm just not big on the design either. I mean, I feel like if they would have went with like a actual Raggedy Ann doll, like the real Annabelle, they honestly could have made that an even more creepy concept, or maybe it would have been more goofy. Honestly, I don't know. But yeah, Annabelle's getting a C for me. So we're down to the final three here. We got Norman Bates from Psycho, and he's gonna go at an A. Now, much like Jack Torrance, I love how Norman Bates is essentially just a man that is in a sense of madness. You know what I mean? He dresses up as his mother, and he has that brooding presence where it's like, it's not immediate danger, but you can tell just like the smile that he gives. You know, he's just a very, very evil presence without being outright crazy looking like a lot of slasher villains you're traditionally used to. I also just have a lot of respect for Norman Bates being kind of the original slasher villain, kind of being one of the original horror icons, because without Psycho, without Norman Bates, we wouldn't have a lot of these iconic characters that we have now. Honestly, I don't think horror would be in a space where it was, because Psycho and movies like Rosemary's Baby kind of transitioned from the time of Universal movie monsters into the new age of horror we're seeing now. And I truly feel Norman Bates deserves a lot of respect from any horror fan of any franchise, because that laid the foundation for tons of movies to come. And now we got the Deadites from Evil Dead. This is probably going to be my most controversial one, because a lot of people probably don't even think this should be on the list, as it's not one individual entity. But the Deadites from Evil Dead are a consistent S for me. Every time they're on screen, their appearance is absolutely terrifying. That was probably one of the most scary things to me as a kid watching Evil Dead, was seeing the Deadites. And I even remember getting scared by the Mila Kunis parody of them like parodied in Evil Dead, one of the later scary movies. And that's just how much of a grip this had on me. I love the whole idea of the Necronomicon summoning them. And just like as a little side note, I would probably also put Ash at S, the protagonist of Evil Dead, because I just love really how this series meshes everything together. And even the newer Evil Deads with the Deadites, I think the designs are truly disturbing, truly creepy, which is hard to do for me nowadays. But when I saw the most recent Evil Dead movie, and I plan to go see Evil Dead Burn soon, I believe is the next one coming out. But the last one they put out in theaters, that shit was genuinely scary. Like, even at my age now, like, it was unsettling, because the mom, when she turns into a Deadite, is just looks completely different than she did before. And that's the scary thing about these Deadites, is like, if you see somebody that was a person before, like a character, get turned into one of these things, the way it transforms them is fucking terrifying. Like, I would not want to be in the Evil Dead universe out of a lot of these. Like, I'll take Jason Voorhees stabbing me into a tree any day before I have to deal with these sadistic fucks. And now we have our final entry being John Carpenter's The Thing. And I'm putting this at an A, and even potential to go to an S, off of one factor alone, to be honest. And that is the dread and the feeling that you get from not knowing what the thing is or who the thing is. because that's the scariest part about this whole thing to me. It can be anything. This entity can be what it wants. It can transform into a dog, a human. The person sitting next to you could be the thing. And the design of the creature, when you actually do see it, I mean, it doesn't really have one distinct design. It's really whatever it is at the time. And that's another very awesome thing about it, is being able to have that expansive of a creature design where you kind of have multiple versions of the thing. And you can't even really tell a lot of the times until it's too late that somebody is. And it's just the level of intelligence this thing has to play mind games on people. I think it's one of the truly most intriguing, thought-provoking horror movies, or horror series, if you want to call it one, that there is. And it's because of the creature that is the main focal point of it. Because whether it's the original one or the sequel where they're in, I think it's like the Norwegians or whatever, but the thing is genuinely very scary. The concept of it's very scary. That's one of the ones that's more scary, honestly, as an adult than it was a child, because I didn't even really understand the thing when I first watched it. Like, I got the general premise, but when you truly realize the dread that the characters in that movie feel, not knowing the truth, not being able to do anything about it, that's truly what puts this at S for me. And honestly, with that being said, that's all of my rankings for horror icons. Now, there are a lot of ones that I left out because I didn't want to include any of the ones in this, and I'm putting into my guilty pleasure horror films. So if you don't see some of the ones that you were expecting on here, probably coming in that future video. But I appreciate you guys for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, make sure to put your opinions down below. And like Cody Leach says, remember, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. That don't mean you have to be one. And with that being said, I'll see y'all in whatever I make next. And I appreciate you being here. And yeah, I'm out.